Hi, Roger here with Lyon and Ashar from Blameless. We'll get into the name in a little bit, but welcome. And tell us, what kind of problem is it that Blameless is trying to solve?
Yeah, so Roger, a few months ago, there was a very large enterprise collaboration company. I won't actually name them, but they actually had a pretty major outage, about 2 hours worth of downtime in that entire quarter. And I like to use the story because I call it the 8.2 million or $10 million parking ticket, which is that because of that issue, they had to end up paying about $10 million in service credits. And their stock took a big hit as well, lost about $2.5 billion in market value just on that day because of that news. And I think to top it all off, you had the analysts in the industry saying like, hey, their competitors are actually more reliable, much better. And so really the question becomes how, reliability is the most important feature of any product that you're building. And then what you're balancing that against is moving really, really quickly and writing a bunch of code and shipping software at incredible paces. So how do you actually balance those things? And what's been around is what you need is a set of practices and principles that have actually been around in the industry for about 15 years, pioneered by folks like Google, and has evolved as it's hit companies like Netflix and others, called SRE, Site Reliability Engineering. And so SRE really gives you the ability as a developer, as a software company, to move fast while not breaking, actually, or maintaining your customers. Keeping your customers happy is really what it's about. And so to answer your question, the long-winded way of saying it is what we do is we take the SRE practices of the best companies of the world, and we make that accessible to every single developer out there, no matter what sort of background or language that they're using. They can actually use the Blameless platform to actually ship code as reliably as a Google or a Netflix.
Mm-hmm. So what is the vision and kind of the mechanics of what Blameless is doing?
Mm-hmm. So the vision is to have a reliable customer experience, encapsulating all the small services and products, anything that bubbles up into that. Ultimately, it's what do people experience? If you're calling an Uber, do you get your car on time? If you're booking a flight, do you get the seat on the flight you need? And this customer experience, there's a lot of legacy in companies. They aren't geared to be software companies like a Netflix, like a Google. How do you get them up to speed quickly and bridge that gap, regardless of what prior decisions made? That's really the vision. And the first step is to measure what it is, and then set goals to incrementally improve. And that incremental continuous improvement is part of what is at the core of Blameless.
Great. So you mentioned basing things on Google. So what extra things are you guys bringing to the table? And I think elaborating on that people who didn't start off as software companies and are trying to adapt for what them is kind of a brave new world is probably something of interest.
Yeah. How about the shifts?
Yeah, so there's a few shifts that are happening. So one is where there's more and more dependence on third-party cloud-like services, right? So what you end up having inside as you're becoming more of a software company, is this proliferation of tooling, particularly around monitoring and observability and continuous integration and continuous delivery and logging. And so it becomes hard to really manage all that information. And so the immediate reaction of teams is to go and hire more people, which then becomes a catch-22, which is I can't really hire more people, and I'm in this mode of constantly churning and trying to, just keep my head above the water. The other thing that's happening is that businesses, reliability has now become not an engineering problem, but it's a business problem, right? So reliability, the person who owns reliability now has a seat at the table with the other C-level executives that are out there. And the third shift that's happening is that there is really no one best way of doing reliability management, right? It's all dependent on your business and what your users really care about. And so what we've done is our unique approach is, number one, let's actually sit on top of and be the central nervous system plus the brain that sort of orchestrates everything that you need, all the human activity needed to actually resolve these issues faster, prevent them from happening again, make sure that the code that's going out is stable in the first place. So we have this kind of intelligence layer that's built on top of all these different tools. What that means is you don't have to think of us as another tool that's sort of added on into this, this proliferation of tooling that's out there, but really 10xing the ROI on the existing platforms that you have in place. The second thing is, Google has a certain way and opinion of doing things, but so does Netflix, and so does Facebook, and all of them are successful in their own ways. So what we've said is we're going to take the best practices of all these different companies versus just focusing on one, and make that accessible, make SRE as a practice accessible to every single developer, and have them choose what works best for them and their business, right? And again, the third thing is always this focus on making the data available at the business level, and making sure that your board and your C-level executives are always aware and bought into what does reliability mean and why it's important to us as a business, and using that as a driver for business types of decisions. So that's kind of what our sort of unique view on the world is. We're not sort of bucketed into very specific categories.
Mm-hmm. You had mentioned some analytics and talking to developers in that kind of analytics space. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, so I mean, the nature of being this central nervous system is that you're connected into every single part of the developer workflow, all the way from when the code is actually being written to when it's being tested to when it's actually running in production. Which means that if we're connected to all of these, we're becoming this sink of data. And so then the question becomes, well, as a human being, somebody has to take that data and turn that into knowledge and make that be actionable. And well, what better way to do that than actually have a system in place that actually does that for you, right? And in today's world, everything is about, there's this proliferation of knowledge workers, and really it's about how do you make them more effective and more powerful, particularly in the software development.
Great. Okay, you have a unique name. There's got to be a reason behind it, and I'm guessing there's something to do with your company culture that you'd pick a name like that.
Yeah. I would say Ashar and I have both been at companies where there's been blame when something goes wrong. And then the instinct is, well, who messed it up? And when you look into it, it's no one, because we collectively made a series of decisions to expose certain vulnerabilities, and maybe it was the right thing to do to move faster. But now, when down the road you have these decisions that were optimal at the time, but imperfect, what happens? And then so the essence of what it takes to improve is to first realize that blame is going to slow everything down. If you're not comfortable when something goes wrong, saying, well, what happened here? And you're not comfortable saying, well, John made a mistake by doing this. If that person feels blamed, then that will get in the way of you fixing the issue. So you have to resolve that as a cultural thing. And really having that embedded into some of these large Fortune 500 companies where there's still literal finger pointing at times, that is a big cultural change. But if you're able to do that, as we've seen with some companies adopting that philosophy, then you can really speed things up. The second is, without blame, you remove fear. So now you are free to go and strive to improve and fail, because if you're doing something novel, it may not work, and you can go push on that. And I think to one of your questions is, this concept of blameless doesn't just apply to engineering and product. It applies to marketing, it applies to sales, it applies to product design. If you have a design that didn't work out as planned, how do you iterate and improve? How do you do that with your marketing? So it's really, it starts with engineering and product, because that's our background, and it's easily measured, but it actually applies to multiple areas. And that as a whole is what we kind of want to do as a company, but we want to help other teams at least adopt a blameless post-mortem culture when they're looking at engineering and product issues.
Sounds like a really interesting approach. So
Yeah.
thanks to you both for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.